Welcome to Conversations That Matter, a policy-driven conversation with local leaders to examine the issues that most affect the quality of life in Kern County. I'm Michael Turnipseed, Executive Director of the Kern County Taxpayers Association, your host. And our guest today is Stacy Kuwahara, Kern County's Director of Behavioral Health Services. Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you.
So, who is Stacy Kuwahara?
Well, that's a really big question. In context of our work here.
How did you get to be where you are today, and your background, and shortly about?
Well, I was born here in Bakersfield and mostly grew up here. My family has been owning and operating a business and was one of the first Japanese families in Kern County. I went to high school here and left as soon as I graduated and lived in a lot of really incredible places. I started my behavioral health career primarily in San Diego, and then I had the opportunity, I worked in England for a few years for the National Health Service doing mental health in England. And then life circumstances brought me back home about, I think I'm going on to like 12 or 13 years ago. And I've been lucky enough to land at the county, and this is where my career's really taken off.
Good. How is the field of mental health changing in Kern County?
I think mental health is changing everywhere. We're seeing it here locally and what's happening, but mental health was, the conversation and the need for mental health was happening before the pandemic. The pandemic really just turned the heat up on an already boiling pot. And what we're seeing now is a combination of kind of our stigma around mental health decreasing, people becoming a lot more comfortable and recognizing the value and the connection of mental health and how it impacts all of our functioning in all areas of our lives, and really being more comfortable looking for services, support, and treatment across a whole spectrum of what that means.
Specifically, what do you see as really the needs of our youth? It seems boys are disconnected and girls are depressed. What's happening in your realm and your services to address these needs?
Youth mental health is a really big area that we have a lot of focus on right now, especially after the pandemic. The period of social isolation and the impact that kind of stay-at-home orders had on our kids was really, really tremendous. And so we see more intense needs for behavioral health services, more crisis, really a lot of unmet mental health need for kids. I think it's a confluence of a lot of factors. Our kids are growing up very differently than we grew up. They're growing up with technology in a way that makes communication and access to getting our needs met very different. This is true for every generation, but I think our phones have really shaped how we connect with each other and how we operate. And that is an amazing thing in that it creates access for a lot of resources that weren't there before, but it also creates a lot of exposure to things that we've never been exposed to. We see videos and have exposure to just almost anything that we want to see through the internet. And I think that has a tremendous impact on how we operate. We're also connecting differently. You and I are kind of old school. When I need to chat with you, you call me up on the phone. But, people text now and they email, and that's a very different way of communicating and connecting with each other that sort of doesn't fully connect us in terms of our body language, and it's just very different than when we're together. So I think this comes together for our kids. I think our kids are incredible. They are bright and smart and just evolved in a way, but they also have a lot of exposure and sensitivity, and I think it impacts their mental health and the way they experience themselves in the world differently. And we need to find different ways to be there to support them and to assist them.
So you mentioned this as an emphasis of your department. What are some of the things you're doing to address specifically
For mental
the
health.
disconnected youth, the boys in particular, and
Sure.
the girls that are having their problems too?
So a couple things. I mean, our department, Kern Behavioral Health and Recovery Services, really ends up being the provider of a lot of services, and we also operate most of the crisis services that happen through Kern County. And so when we think about the whole spectrum of behavioral health need, it pulls on more than just what our department offers. A lot of what we do involves outreach, education, kind of anti-stigma campaigns, awareness campaigns. That's really important at kind of a very low level. Let people know what's available, what's out there, and where they can go for help. One of the biggest issues that we're facing right now is really the mental health workforce shortage and the lack of parity between what we provide to Medi-Cal beneficiaries and the clients we serve, and then what commercial insurance, private insurance, like what you and I have, and what gets covered. There are not very many mental health workers for what the demand is, and there's really even a more extreme parity when you look at what is provided through my department versus what's available through private insurance. It's very, very hard to find a clinician, to find a psychiatrist, to find somebody to work for, and that's compounded with kids, and it's, I would argue, even harder when you have private insurance.
So what are you doing to kind of
Address
grow
this?
your own and address these things? How do we, as a community, grow our own mental health tech clinicians? I'm not necessarily psychiatrists because we don't have a school here for that.
We do, actually. We've got a psychiatric residency program that we partner with Kern Medical and UCLA, which has been tremendous. I think the other thing, part of it is being able to talk about the whole spectrum of mental health in a very wide way, because while that both addresses people who are struggling and who have their own need, it also creates awareness of the value of working in this field. I think that certain people with personalities and drives are going to be drawn to doing this kind of service work. It's very demanding. It pulls on certain people, but it's incredibly meaningful, purpose-driven work that really can be profound and rewarding. So we try to talk about how rewarding this work is. We really are advocating for the career opportunities that this type of career can open. And also, you know, we're trying to do as much advocacy about really raising our pay scales, because mental health as a whole hasn't really been a part of healthcare that has been established and valued in the same way, and it really needs to come up in both recognition and compensation. And ultimately, that's what's going to drive people who are compelled to work in this field.
I think you're very true. Your mental health affects your physical health.
Completely.
And I think that's an important point to make. So obviously another gigantic challenge is the homelessness. Mental health, substance abuse.
Yeah.
How is your department addressing that?
Gosh, we're doing a lot, actually. We've always been working with homeless individuals and people on the street, but in the last couple of years, we've really needed to increase the work, and that's being supported right now with funding and initiatives coming through from the state also. We do a lot of street outreach, active street outreach. We are partnering with many of our local agencies and partners, law enforcement, flood ministries, all of the navigation centers, all of the shelters, to both kind of address what their needs are and recognize just because you move somebody, say, off the street into temporary housing, be it like a navigation center or shelter, their mental health needs aren't immediately addressed. You really have to follow them through this whole continuum and be there with them every step of the way. It's really important to meet somebody where they're at and be ready to provide whatever service they need at whatever time. This is what I really love about what we're doing in our street outreach, because our team actually drives around in a van looking for the people they serve and meeting new people that we will serve, and they have their van packed with almost everything they can think of needing. You know, sleeping bags, clothes, food, cigarettes, phone chargers, and they use those materials to just begin to engage and develop a relationship with somebody. I have a psychiatrist that goes out with the team. Right now it's 1 day a week. We're going to be increasing that. And it's incredible to me because people are actually really willing to receive services, especially the medication and psychiatric services, even if they're not quite willing to go into shelter and leave the street. And so for us, our motto is we're going to start wherever they are ready to start. We will meet them wherever they're at, because one step in any direction that is moving them closer to being off the street is a great step.
Busy, busy, busy. Let's take a short break to hear a message about KernTax. I'm Michael Turnipseed, for the past 18 years, Executive Director of the Kern County Taxpayers Association. Since 2007, KernTax has been working with local school districts to develop effective, efficient school facility financing bonds that provide districts with more funds for new schools and the ability to renovate older facilities while reducing costs to taxpayers by $1.5 billion over the life of the bonds. In addition, KernTax has been a tireless advocate for improving educational outcomes, expanding educational opportunities, and enhancing workforce development. If you are interested in participating in this modernization of our education system, send me an email at KernTax@KernTaxpayers.org. Thank you very much for your time. How does Care Court fit in and how your department deals with the homeless?
So Care Court's it's going to be a big project and a very new project. There are a couple of counties in the state that are going live with Care Court at the end of this year. Kern County will be going live with Care Court in December of 2024. It's going to involve the courts and our legal partners, and really it is an opportunity to encourage people who aren't currently engaged in services, who are living unsheltered on the street, and creating kind of more resources to engage them in services. We have a lot of questions about what is Care Court really going to look like? What are the parameters? How effective is it going to be? So it's going to be really interesting to watch these pilot counties over the next year and see where their successes are, where their struggles are, and what the impacts are. Is this really going to work? Is this an idea that's going to help address homelessness?
So we've talked about youth, we've talked about homelessness. What are some of the other local needs that we have in the mental health field that you address on a daily basis?
Well, what I love about what we do with Kern Behavioral Health is we're touching on mental health across this entire spectrum. Mental health is just part of our overall functioning and how we exist. And so being able to just talk about how do we take care of ourselves and how are we addressing our mental needs in addition to our physical needs, in terms of just normalizing mental health and encouraging good practice and habit, is kind of at this end. And on the other end, we're dealing with very chronically mentally ill, very serious emergency needs, and addressing what people need when they're at their most acute and most vulnerable, and get to do everything in between. And I think that's such a important and powerful place and message and service for our community. I'm working on an initiative with public health and Bryn Kerrigan right now, talking about how are we taking care of ourselves this year? How are we recovering from the last few years of the pandemic? And what I love about this initiative is the integration and the recognition that our physical health and our mental health are deeply entwined components that make up how we behave in the world, how we feel, and just how we move in our social relationships and everything we're doing.
Quick question. You started a pilot project this year with Bakersfield Police Department. You have a person on staff on call. Can you explain that program to us and how that's changing, and what are your plans to expand this kind of more of a community police and non-sworn officer response to people with mental health challenges?
We've been working with Bakersfield Police Department and KCSO for about 20 years now, and our partnerships with them are tremendous. We're doing a couple of new initiatives that have been pretty innovative. We have co-response teams, so this is a behavioral health worker who works alongside an officer. They are following kind of a specific caseload, doing a lot of homeless outreach, supporting code enforcement, working with our homeless outreach teams, and really trying to serve the community and meet the needs for safety and homelessness through that initiative. I also have a behavioral health worker who's working in the 911 communication center. This has been really, really exciting. We've been doing this for about a year now, and they will have calls. So if somebody's calling 911 and they're having more of a mental health emergency, then if it can be, the call is diverted to my behavioral health worker, and she's able to do things that the police dispatchers can't. She can go into our electronic health record, see if that person's open to a team, look at kind of what their behavioral health history is, and support them in that call with the information that we have. She can connect them to a mental health crisis line, connect them to mental health resources, and in a lot of calls has been able to divert. So instead of sending a police officer out to somebody, connect them to services, connect them to a behavioral health worker. That's been incredibly important because a lot of our mental health calls are moving through 911 instead of coming to behavioral health. And this is just creating better access, better service, really taking care of our Kern County residents.
Let's take another short break to hear a message from KernTax.
Hi, I'm Adam Cohen. I'm a board of director at KernTax. At KernTax, we believe in data-driven policy making. To do this, we engage community leaders and help support fact-based research on issues that matter to our community.
Can you go in a little more depth about your work with the Kern County Health Department and where that's going to go? Because to me, that's, like you mentioned it, I think fairly briefly, what's really the potential to address the health outcomes? Because I think, as we know, our health outcomes are really some of the worst in California.
Sure. I think it's a great initiative. Each month we're going to be talking about a different theme. So we started talking about exercise. This month we're talking about nutrition. We're going to talk about everything from sleeping to getting outdoors to having fun and incorporating more joy into our lives. These are really important ideas to talk about because they're encouragements to people around changing behaviors and habits that are going to both support their physical health and their mental health. And while, somebody might not necessarily connect with exercise, they're going to really connect with food or sleeping or vice versa. And what I love about it is it's going to go throughout the whole year. It's really giving our community tips and ideas and resources for just how to even take a small step to work toward being healthier and caring for ourselves.
There's a new bill in Sacramento, SB 43.
Yeah.
Would you talk about its impacts that it could have on residents of Kern County?
So SB 43 is a really tremendous proposal to change our LPS laws, which are the laws that govern.
What are LPS?
LPS, Lanterman-Petrus Short Act. These are the laws that govern when somebody is involuntarily treated without giving their consent, and eventually lead into involuntary hospitalization or potentially conservatorship. This bill proposal is really being drafted, I think, as a component to address homelessness. What's concerning for me is it's very, very wide. It's inclusive in a very large way that I think has potential to really impact everybody's rights and involuntarily detain them and compel mental health treatment under a very, very broad umbrella. It'll have impacts on our infrastructure and our workforce. I don't know that we have a mental health system that's ready to meet the needs of such an expansive law. And I do think that our patients' rights advocacy groups are going to have some really serious concerns about how overreaching this new proposal is.
Sacramento writes a lot of bills that are awfully going to put tremendous burdens on the citizens, that's for sure. And a final question, what are the final things you want to say about mental health in Kern County right now before we finish the interview?
I think Kern County is a great place for me to be working in mental health because there is a lot of support and partnership and connection for us to be able to do the work we're doing. We really need to build out our resources. We need more clinicians and more case managers and more people at all levels coming into this work. We need to build out the infrastructure and the support so that we can actually meet the need of what the community is facing right now. That's the real crisis we're in, and it's important. It's like not having enough doctors and nurses, and our mental health impacts all other areas of our functioning. And if we're not taking care of it, it's going to impact people's abilities to keep their jobs and to maintain their relationships. And you know that when those two things go, everything else can really fall away if you don't take care of it.
We want to thank Stacy Kuwahara for joining us today for Conversations That Matter. KernTax wants to thank the video production class, Kern High School District Career Technical Education Center, instructor Lisa Kirsch, and her students for providing video production services for Conversation That Matter. We also want to thank our viewers who took the time to watch our broadcast and hope you found the discussion valuable. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us at KernTax@KernTaxpayers.org or visit our website, www.KernTaxpayers.org. Again, thank you for watching Conversations That Matter.